fellow riders, and welcome back to Airhead Barn. We took a pretty nice break from wrenching, we took a vacation and went for motorcycle riding and camping in Colorado flat tops. You can look on YouTube actually how that whole trip went. It was a 4-day really gorgeous trip, and now it's time to come back to the garage and continue this restoration project. So the only remaining thing of beside putting things back on a bike, like a component type of rebuild and restoration, is basically this rear lester wheel. In a previous episode we showed you how you can change bearings of a front wheel and properly adjust the preload, and now we are going to do the same with the rear wheel. Okay, so first thing we need to do is to remove these 5 screws to remove the cover. Should be screws with the wave washers. Cover with the seal we will be replaced. Gasket that we are going to replace. This is a top hat and bearing. Okay. So in order to remove outer races from a hub, we will need to heat up the hub properly with either heat gun or a torch. And then we are going to drive shaft from the other side and then just tap it slightly. If hub is properly heated, it should just pop out. And you are removing all this thing as a unit. That's very important. That's why we are not removing bearing at this point. Okay. Let's come back to this side. Head is just too big, so this cannot I cannot drive it through the seal, so I need to remove seal first. Okay. There it is, seal with a spacer. And now we can proceed. This one goes over. Okay, now it's time to heat everything up, and then we will slightly tap it on this side and drive everything as a unit out. That's it. So now when whole bearing stack is out, we will leave it to cool down. In the same time we will leave hub to cool down, then we can proceed with cleaning everything and putting new bearings and setting the preload. One more time, I cannot emphasize enough to heat up the hub. It needs to be heated up to 100 degrees Celsius. It's aluminum hub. Older models had a steel hub. Even that one is beneficial to heat. It's much more easier to remove this bearing stack or especially out of races. If these aluminum hubs, if you don't heat them up, you will most likely destroy them by trying just to pull out the outer races. So here we are back, and it's time to continue with the bearing installation on this rear Lester wheel. I was able to clean everything and also to paint these Lester wheels, and now we will proceed with the setting preload and then putting a whole stack of bearings back into the rear wheel hub. Before actually setting a preload of new bearings, I always like to check what the preload of the old bearings was, so that gives me a pretty good starting point. So here I have our stack of bearings and all internal parts that we removed from the hub. And now these are old bearings, so now we will check if preload was set up correctly. So in order to do that, you would need to have this machined pipe to offset for the length of axle. So you can tighten everything, and then we are going to torque everything to spec. Spec calls for the rear wheel 35 foot-pounds. Okay, and now what you want to see is actually this outer sleeve to be preloaded in such a way that you are not able to easily push it with one finger, but you would need two fingers to push it radially actually to move it. And if you look, actually this one flaps around fairly easily, so these bearings are not preloaded at all. So it's really good that we are checking this. There is no free play here whatsoever, but there is no preload as well. I wonder, these bearings could probably be reused, because if they were not preloaded, that means they are probably in pretty good shape. But anyway, we are going to replace it because we have replacement bearings here. Okay, so now let's disassemble this to see what's inside, and then we are going to start with preloading our new bearings. Okay. Okay, so on top we have first bearing, so outer races and inner bearing goes here. Then we have this outer sleeve, and then inside we have inner sleeve as well. Usually these have a wedding band, but what we saw on the front wheel as well, these Lester wheels did not have it, so we are going to need to adjust this one actually for in order to get a good preload. And then finally there is outer race and bearing on the top. Okay, so now we are going to install our bearings dry and see what the preload looks like, basically just out of the box. Okay, first one bearing, and then this inner spacer or sleeve, then outer one that goes on top, and another bearing. just like that. And then our machined pipe that I bought from CycleWorks. Washer and nut. Try to center everything as best as you can. And now we are going to tighten this thing. Okay. And torque it to 35. There it is. So what we can see here, that this one is actually a bit better, but still I can push it only with one finger, so it needs to be preloaded a bit more. So in order to do that, that inner sleeve that we put after the lower bearing actually needs to be sanded a bit. If you imagine, for instance, if you start putting more material on top of that sleeve, you will get less and less preload. On the other hand, if you shave some of the material, take it out, you will get more and more preload, and that's what we are going to do. So here, it's almost there, so we don't need to go crazy with sanding that sleeve. Usually if you have a wedding band, that's what you would sand, but since here we don't have, with lesser wheels, we don't have any wedding band, we are going to sand the sleeve. And that we will do just a tiny bit. And constantly check the preload. Okay. Okay, so this is a guy that we are going to sand, and then you can see it's just one piece, single piece of material, so I can start with either side, sanding it just a tiny bit. So what I have here is 320 like my sandpaper, and then I'll start with creating a figure eights on a flat surface, and then you want to rotate it 90 degrees, and then 90 degrees, and then again 90 degrees. So I counted 4 turns each time, and then I can actually check what did I get. Okay. Again, torque it to 35. Okay. So we definitely have more preload that we had before, but I can still push it with only one finger, so we will continue sanding. Always a good idea to take small steps when sanding so you don't overdo it. out cold is good. Okay, that's it. Now we will proceed with the greasing these bearings, heating up the hub and inserting everything inside the hub. Okay, so now we can proceed with packing bearings with grease. Same as with front wheel, we are going to use liquid moly LM50, but any kind of high temp true bearing grease will work here for this application. Okay. So exactly same principle as we did with the front bearings. Right, so we will put them on axle. I will also put some grease on this inner sleeve. Now tiny bit on the inside of the outer sleeve. Like that. And then other bearing. And finally, we should be able to torque So now we will proceed with heating up the hub to 100 degrees Celsius. Always remember when doing this kind of work, removing bearings, putting them back in, heat is your friend. So that's what we are going to do here. Okay. that's it, all the way in. And now we are going to let it cool down. So after everything cooled off, we can proceed with putting seals and basically concluding this rear wheel restoration. So first what we are going to do is take a cover, and then I have a seal for that one. Seal from this side and on the other side are different. This one is a bit thicker. And it can be made of outer part, can be made of metal or plastic. This one apparently is made of plastic, but any is going to work. So we are just going to press in the seal inside the cover. Okay. Just help it a tiny bit with a 24mm socket. That should be enough. And then this top hat goes through. We can actually grease this one a tiny bit. And just take a tiny bit of bearing grease and put it on a bearing. Bearing grease and put it on a seal. And then top hat goes through, just like this. And now we have a gasket that goes right here. And finally, cover goes on top. Now we are going to put another seal. This one is, as I said, thinner. And let's put some grease on this one as well. And top hat goes from underneath. This. We'll just put a tiny bit of grease on the splines. I like using this LM508 for this application. It's the same grease that I use for the exhaust nuts. And then brush like this. Helps. Okay, first comes a bit of... Okay, there it is. You don't need to go crazy here. Just a bit of grease, and then on the final drive side as well is all what you need. so with that I would like to conclude this episode of a restoration of a rear wheel. Wheel is now ready to be installed back on a bike. I hope you like this, and thanks for watching.